Hyvät kuuntelijat, tervetuloa jälleen kerran Elämän Pelikirja podcastiin, jota teemme Rakkaudesta Urheilijoihin. Minä olen Arto Kuuluvainen ja juonan podcastin yhdessä Toni Salmelaisen kanssa. Moi Toni.
Moi moi.
No niin, se oli taas yksi Suomen visiitti. Olit katsoa Lennun jäähyväismatsia Nordicsella. Kylmät väreet, kun katselin niitä videoita sieltä, mutta miltä se paikan päällä vaikutti?
No kyllä, siitä kylmät väreet tuli ja itsellekin vanhoja muistoja ja upeita kun muistetaan ja pelaajat saa sen muistohetken, semmoisen rituaalin myös jättää jäähyväiset niin kuin koko yhteisölle ja tämä jos mikä kasvattaa urheilukulttuuria kokonaisuudessa ja hienoa kun Suomessa on alettu ottaa huomioon urheilijoita enemmän ja enemmän ja hoitaa näitä asioita paremmin. Kyllä.
Hattua päästä IFK-suuntaan taas todella hienosti järjestetty juttu, mutta mennään tämän päivän vieraaseen pienen aasinsillan kautta. Ja nyt jo tässä vaiheessa sanotaan, että tämä jakso tullaan tekemään englanniksi, tehdään tämmöinen pieni testi tällä kertaa. Mutta niin, mitä sulle tulee pyöräilystä mieleen?
Pyöräilystä tulee siinäkin mieleen se, että se on erittäin oiva harjoittelumuoto jääkiekkoilijalle, sitä käytetään aika paljon. Se on päivittäin mukana niin palauttavana kuin alkulämmittelyissä ja sitten itsellä meillä niin kuin Bayeri on ollut hyvin vahvasti mukana, että siellä vanhemmat on asunut, niin on itse tykännyt lähteä vuorille pyöräilemään ja se on äärimmäisen kova, hyvä treenimuoto ja saksalaiset pelaajat onkin niin kuin aina aivan huippukunnossa ollut, koska ne viettää siellä hirveästi aikaa ja jalat toimii niin sanotusti, eivät väsy ja maitohappokestävyys on huomattavasti kovempi kuin monella ja uskon, että se tulee nimenomaan pyöräilykilometreistä, mitä ne käyvät ihan joukkueena myös pyöräilee vuorilla ja sitten maantiepyörään.
Yes, mutta näillä saatesanoilla niin vaihdetaan kieli englanniksi ja otetaan sitä meidän vieras. So, welcome to the show, Kjell Carlström.
Hi there. Very nice to be here.
Great to have you. First of all, you're one of the best Finnish cyclists ever, but how did it all start? How did you become a cyclist?
Well, actually, I would say it was a long story because when I was really a small child, like a few years old, and I started riding my bike. The first time I remember riding with my bike without training wheels, or what are they called? It was with my grandmom, and suddenly I hear her voice further away, like it was getting more distant, 5 meters, 10 meters, and then I realized, I'm riding myself. So then I stopped and I crashed. But since then I always really liked riding my bike, and we lived in the countryside, so we had 350 meters of gravel road to the asphalt road, and I was allowed to ride back and forth on that part. And when we were kids, we were playing around, and there were different series in the television. So we used to like playing around like motorbikes and things like this. But then one of my best, where I actually went to daycare with his family, Matthias Hannus, his father was one of the greatest cyclists in Finland at that time, Harry Hannus. He went to 4 different Olympics. He competed in a lot of big races, including the Worlds, where he got in the amateurs the 4th place as the best. So really, really top level at that time. But he never turned pro. If he would have turned pro, I think he could have had maybe a longer or different career, but now he focused on being an amateur and getting really good results there. And maybe it was a little bit because of this. So my friend, he started out riding his bike maybe at around 10 years old, also competitively. And I had been part of Harry Hannes race, which is just a kids race. Every year there was one time this race, and I competed several times in it. Sometimes I won my class, and sometimes I didn't. But then around when I was 12 years old, we were doing a lot of back and forth because my friend, he lived around 3 kilometers from us, and we used to go to each other by bike. And I usually got left behind, and as sportsmen do, which I found out later, is that you always try to find an excuse, and it's not yourself. It's something else. And I said to him, listen, if I would have a nice bike like you have, I could stay with you. But now I have this old bike that is only 3 gears, and I cannot stay with you. So that's the reason. And then at a certain point, he got sick of hearing this. So he said, yeah, well, go and buy a real bike then, and we will compete and see who's better. So then I could convince my parents to chip in, and they put in most of the money for a new bike, the first race bike that I got. And when I was 12 years old, or almost 13, I was the first bike that we bought, Peugeot 12 speed, because that was quite a nice bike at that time. And I started competing in small races in Finland, and I was second to last, third to last, but never last. So the first year it was all about just surviving, sort of in the race. Some crashes sometimes, but never gave up, and then it went on.
How did you continue? How did you feel and get into it? Like really, like riding the bike can be quite a meditative process. At least I feel so. But what made you a competitor?
Well, I was actually I really liked playing games, and I played ice hockey a little bit. I played volleyball. I played soccer. So I liked all these games of team games, let's say like this. And also with my friends, we always used to play something, hockey or whatever we could find a ball somewhere, and we played with that. So probably I could have, or I would have been more into those kinds of games if we would have lived closer to the ice skating place in Porvoo, in my home city. But my parents didn't want to go back and forth all the time. So I think that was one of the reasons. So I was always competitive. I liked that feeling of trying to be better than the rest and better than the competitors, and sometimes even better than the ones in the same team, just trying to be better. So pretty quickly when I started out and I realized that I'm not even close to my friends, because I had a couple of other friends that were riding the bike also, and they were all stronger than me. So I said, okay, I need to put a goal. If I don't put a goal, then I can stop also. And I knew that it most probably will take a little bit of time before I get to that level, because they have already started a few years earlier. And I put a goal that when I'm 18, I need to be as good as my friends. If I'm not on the level, I will stop. So that was probably a really, really important decision.
You said you like team sports, and to my understanding, cycling is also like a team sport, but people might not realize how much of a team sport. Could you explain about the team and how it works as a cyclist, as a rider?
Yeah.
You have different roles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have a lot of different roles, and I mean, it is like in any team sport. if you're a great individual, you can for example, score a lot of goals, and you can maybe even make a game decisive because of what you have done with your skills. But if you're only one and there should be 10 guys on the field, then it's a little bit difficult to play against 10. So you need the team. And it's the same thing in cycling. So normally, when I started out, normally you had 8 riders in the race, and in the Grand Tours you had 9 riders. Now it's 8 riders in the Grand Tours and 7 riders in most of the other races. You can put a few different categories for the riders. You have riders that are sprinters. You have riders that are more classic riders that are able to ride hard for a longer time and have good skills on the bike to be there. And then you have climbers and GC riders, which are riders that are aiming for the general classification in a stage race, which can be then from a few days until 3 weeks. So those types of riders are, and then the let's say that there's also a spot for TT specialists, which are riders that are good to ride a certain distance against the clock, a time trial, and then everybody that doesn't fit into one of these categories could be called a helper or a rouleur, depending on his body type. So there's a lot of different types of riders. First of all, there are I would say two or maybe 3 main elements that you have to overcome. One, I think you all have tried it on the bike, and when it's windy, it's really hard, especially if you have the headwind. So the wind is one. Second thing is the terrain. If the terrain is it's uphill and you're heavy, then it's gonna be a hard one. But if you're light, or light compared to the power that you're putting out, then it's pretty okay. Then the third thing I would say that is important is weather and temperature. So that's a little bit interconnected with how heavy you are, if you are light or not, and sometimes you have a benefit from being a little bit more on the heavy side instead of really skinny. But these parts they all go towards team tactics in some ways. The weather part is maybe not so much. You have to think about it yourself. But if, let's say, you have a captain that you're riding for, and there's really suddenly a bad weather, a storm or rain or something coming in, then you don't usually have to go back yourself to the car. So the cyclists, they are riding in a peloton, and behind the peloton there's the service cars, the neutral and the team service cars, and there you have the possibility of getting mechanical assistance, or so you send one of the teammates back to. That's one thing. When it's regarding the wind, the best place is to be inside the peloton, because the peloton, with the bunch of the riders, all riders in there, it creates almost like I wouldn't say vacuum, but the wind, it's a windshield. So when you're sitting inside the peloton, in the middle of the peloton, you don't almost feel the wind. And the guys that are in the front, they might be going full gas. Let's say if your speed is at 50 kilometers an hour, and you sit in the middle of the peloton, and you don't get tired, but the guys that are working in front, they really are on the limit. They are pushing hard. So then those are the wind is of course a super important part. But then when I talked about the bunch, it is a lot of riders that you can say that there are maybe 200 of them, or nowadays a little bit less in a race, and the road is only, what is it, 7 meters or 10 meters wide, so everybody cannot fit onto the road, and that means that when you come to a crucial point, and this, for example, it could be a climb, it could be a corner before a tricky section like cobblestones, or it could be a corner before coming into a windy section. And so all these parts, you use your teammate to actually come into a good position or be sheltered from the wind or whatever it could be. And then, of course, if you're a sprinter, it's the same thing. You're super strong for maybe 20 seconds, but you have to do 200 kilometers before that. So in order for yourself to save energy, you need to have shelter from the riders that are your teammates. And then when you come to the final 200 meters, then you're actually starting to put out the maximum power that you have. So that's I would say in a brief description how you can use your teammates. It's also the same thing when you come to the mountains, for example. The most important thing is that you get into a good position so that you're more or less at the same spot as the other contenders in the mountains, and then it's up to you.
That's really interesting. How about, what was your role, and also what is there a role that you would have wanted to be? Because I guess everybody knows the main riders, and then, like always, the role players, so to speak, are less known or less famous. So what was your role?
Well, it actually evolved. It wasn't always the same. But I think if you go back to when you're young and when you're developing, you're aiming to become something. If you have good skills in sprinting, you try to become the best sprinter in the world. If you're good at climbing, you might be aiming to become the best climber in the world, or whatever it could be. I was, at that time, I was watching television, Eurosport, and there was a guy named Miguel Indurain, who was winning a lot in Grand Tours, and especially the Tour de France. And of course, I was watching him, and I was thinking, that would be nice. But yeah, then when you go on and you understand a little bit more about your capacity and physical abilities, then you have to adapt, and you have to understand, okay, where are my limits, and what can I do and what can I not. So I guess that I'm okay, but not brilliant in time trial, for example. I'm okay, but not brilliant in sprinting. I'm okay, but not brilliant at climbing either. So I was a little bit of an all-rounder, but not a star. And when you're like that, then you have to figure out how can you somehow win anyway, because if you don't win, it's super difficult to get to the top. In Finland we have like between 50 and 100 guys in the elite series, and then if you go to a country like Belgium, you have to put a 0 or even more after that. So it's a complete different level. And if you put all the countries together, you have a lot of riders that are competing for the 600 places that are in the top on the top level. So to be able to get to one of the 20 teams that are there, it's quite hard. And if you're not the top rider in any of those disciplines, you really have to figure out how can you stand out. So how can you stand out so that you're going to be picked by one of those teams? And originally, I didn't have that idea of turning pro. I did like maybe 3 or 4 years as a rider before I really understood where I'm going. And I had been pushing and getting a little bit better. And then I reached the level where I was as good as my friends, more or less when I was 18 years old. And I could enter into the national team of Finland. And then we started going out to race abroad. And then I saw again, like, whew, my friends were here, but those guys, they are here. So I need to again bump it up to the next level. That it inspired me to continue working. I saw that I was getting better and better. So it was a constant evolution of the skills and the form. I think now I actually forgot what was it that we were aiming for, but
your role, as you said, you were an all-arounder, but what would you have wanted to be? And we can also jump into your best moments as a rider. You had success in Finland, but also like in Tour de France. Could you tell us more about that? Like, I think Tour de France is the most famous Grand Prix, or not sure even how you say it, but everybody knows that. Everyone who follows athlete, they know Tour de France.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing was that I realized that I'm most probably not going to be a contender for the GC, for the general classification of a Grand Tour like the Tour de France. This maybe happened when I was 20 or something like this. And then I still needed to figure out a way to get to the top level, because I was still an amateur. And that was actually a defining moment, because we were doing the trips here and there in Europe. And one time we went to Tour of Denmark. And in Tour of Denmark, there were a lot of pro riders, a lot of really good ones, and also stars that had been competing in the Tour de France. For example, Bjarne Riis. And Bjarne Riis, he won once the Tour de France. And he happened to start 1 minute behind me in the time trial, and after half of the time trial, which was 15 kilometers, so after 7 kilometers more or less, he passed me, and there was a tight corner to the right and then a tight corner to the left, and a little bit uphill. When he came into the corner, he had to brake full gas and then sprint again, just to break into the next corner, a little bit like a MotoGP. And then when I came to the corner, I didn't have to brake. So that was the speed difference between me and him. And he won the race, and I was like almost one of the last guys. And that for me, it was super important, because then you had a black background in cycling. There was a lot of talk about doping. There was these scandals happening a little bit later than this time that I was in Denmark. But of course, we speculated, how is it possible that this guy can be that much stronger than us? And why does he? How is it possible? And that was because we didn't understand how much it can help from being professional, riding your bike every day, thinking about what you eat, thinking about how you live your life and how you sleep and everything. But our solution was that most probably they might be doing doping. And then we had this conversation about it, and I said to my friends, listen, I'm not going to take anything, and if I would have to do that, then I will stop. I prefer to stop than to risk my health or whatever. And one of the friends said, and that was a little bit older, he said, listen, don't say something like this that you cannot keep in 5 or 10 years when you're a pro. And I said, yeah, but that's not me. I will stop before I try something like that, because I want to sit in my rocking chair when I'm 70 and look at whatever trophies that I got and say I did it. And for me that was super defining also later in the career. At that moment I didn't know if I would ever be a pro, but a few years after that I had been able to refine my skills and understand where I could make the difference. And I needed to go into a break, which means that you escape from the bunch and you get a minute or 2 minutes or 10 minutes gap, and then the bunch starts to get try to work the way back. It's part of tactics, because when you have teams, then you try to put pressure on the team that is the strongest, or the team that has the leader. And that means that that if there are people that are attacking a lot in the beginning, you cannot go after each attack because it's really tiring. And if there are attacks happening for 1 hour or 2 hours, which it could be for 50 to 100 kilometers, it's almost impossible to cover everything. So it's better to relax it, let the break go, and then you put your team up to work, and they slowly bring it back. And that, of course, it depends on how many people go in the break. But if you're smart, you're able to control that one also, and try to limit the groups that are going to 4 or 5 people, and then it's much easier to control. If it's 20, it's a different story. But that way, I realized that my skill sets are made for attacking in the beginning and getting into a break of 4 or 10 people and trying to win from the break, because I'm not slow. I'm quite fast, but I'm not a sprinter. So if I can sprint from a reduced group, I actually have a chance. So for me, that was something that I really tried to do, and that pushed me also to the next level in a physiology, because I was doing all these attacks and trying. So then you try maybe 10 times and you get tired, and then you still need to finish the race. So yeah, it's a good training also. And because of this, I was able to win some races, just because I adopted a tactic and could understand the dynamics of the race, so that I knew when it's a good possibility and when it doesn't make any sense. And then you also learn tricks how to get into it, and following the correct rider, so you see who's eager to go, and so on. And that meant that I was good on a good level on all the different parts, but I think that the tactical aspect to it was the most important.
Yeah, in hockey we talk about hockey IQ. I guess you would call this the cyclist IQ, that you have picking
Maybe.
your spots, understanding your performance abilities, and so on. Like that's very interesting. You competed 3 times in Tour de France.
Yeah.
Was that your main goal, and also where were your best moments as a rider throughout your years?
Actually, I had a lot, well, not a lot, but I had several different great moments, and they are spread out over the career. So the first one that I remember as really exceptional was in '97, which means 5 years before I turned pro, where we went to a race post-Girot in Sweden, which was a quite a big race with a mix between amateurs and pros, and I was able to win the under 23 category, which means all the riders that were in the under 23 were competing for that. So every day it was a 6-day stage race. You had to be up there with the best guys to have the best possible time in the end, and I won it. And that was a huge achievement for me at that moment. And then the next thing that I remember as remarkable was when I won Tour of Serbia in '99. It was also an open race, so to say, with both pros and amateurs. And I was going good. And then at a certain moment, because a little bit of tactics and of course I had to have the skills and physical capacity, but I found myself in the yellow jersey, which is the leader, going into a time trial, which, like I said before, I'm not a super guy in time trials, but I won the time trial because I convinced myself that I need to win it in order to be able to win the whole race. And since I was starting as the last guy in the yellow jersey in the time trial, it gave me a lot of extra motivation. So that was another really, really important moment for me. But then, then when I actually started as a pro, I had to again restart the learning process. It's a little bit a different world. It's so much more structured, and the riders are, you're competing mostly against only pros. And depending on the race, it can be super hard. And so for me, the first 3 years I spent in Amore Vita, which is it still exists, but it's quite a small team, and we raced a little bit here. And it was only in 2004 that I really got a good result there, and I won again a stage race, Unica Classic in Austria. And that was, again, it was purely because of a breakaway. On stage 2, I won the stage from a 3-man break, and we had like a gap of 1 minute 20 or something to the rest of the bunch, and I was then able to hold it for the rest of the race. So again, it was a very important point of my career, because this meant by this result I could step up to the highest level. In Amore Vita, it was a second tier team at that moment, but then I got to Liquigas Bianchi, who was on the top level, and there I think I spent 5 years with Liquigas, and I definitely got the best results there. I think the from a results perspective, the absolutely best race was Paris-Nice, that I won stage 3 in 2008, where once again it was a breakaway, quite a hard stage with a lot of up and down, and in the last 20 kilometers there was one climb of 10 kilometers that we had to get over, and then down on the other side into Saint-Étienne, where we sprinted for the stage. But again, tactics was playing a big part of that. But I did the tour 3 times, and I think felt like it was the most important race, and it is also from a media perspective, I think, because most of the attention on all of these stage races are on the Tour de France. It's because they have organized it well. It's in July when it's nice weather. People come out to watch, and I think that the fans and the public, it's the most important thing I think in any sport, because it creates the feeling, it creates an atmosphere that is so important for both the people that are doing the race or the game and the fans, and the complete involvement of everybody. And I think in the tour there's always been a lot of spectators, and that creates that atmosphere. So because of this all attention on this one race, of course it is super important. And for me, I got the best result in one of the tours in 2006 on on stage 8. I was second in a race or in a stage. But at the same time, we also had really good results with one of my teammates. He won a stage, and of course I played part of that. I played my role in helping out. So yeah, when you get over the finish line and you realize your teammate won, you're also super happy. It's maybe not exactly the same feeling as when you win yourself, but still, you know that you have done your part, and you can be super proud about it.
Yeah, cycling is a team sport indeed. I could ask our last mile question now. We nowadays ask together with our commercial partner Parcelsea from each athlete that did you had a moment in your career that you decided that once more I will put all in. I have one more target. I will do everything to reach it. So can you find that kind of moment from your sporting career?
What was your last mile moment?
Yeah,
I cannot find one moment. That's the thing. I can find many moments.
Yeah.
And I actually have to come back to the first point when I said when I'm 18 years old, if I'm not as good as my friends, that was my last mile. Because if I wouldn't have done that, I would have stopped. Second last mile was 2001 when I decided that if I cannot get a pro contract, I will stop. And in 2002 I was professional, even if it was a small team. But then that small team it wasn't easy to be there and compete with the big teams. So in 2004 I put another last mile. If I'm not in a better team by end of this year, I will stop. And I managed to win a race in Unica Classic and became or got a pro contract with Liquigas. So actually there has been several different last miles, and unfortunately for me, the last mile, it never came really, because I didn't realize it, and that was to a certain extent a pity, because if I would have understood that actually this year it's going to be the last year, I would have done things a little bit differently probably. I would have maybe thought about my racing differently. And this was in 2011 with Team Sky. I had done 2 years with them, teammate with Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome. And at the same time, that year in 2011, our second kid was born, and it was actually I was on a bike race in Belgium where my wife called me or sent me a message during the stage that I read after the stage that now it's time. If you want to come, you should come now. So then I actually flew home. I stopped the race and I flew home to be part of the kid's birth, and that was a sort of a crossroad, because in theory I could have stayed there. I was doing good in the race. I was 7th in the GC or something like that when I stopped, and instead I decided I would go home to attend the birth of my child. And in the end, a couple of weeks later, or even 10 days later, I did my last race as a professional in Italy, and that was it. And it was only after my last race that I realized that was my last race.
That's very interesting. Very target-oriented goal setting, kept your career going, also achieving those achievements and goals. But then when as you said, the last mile came, it kind of happened without realization what is happening, maybe lacking that final targeted goal. And then, as you said, life happened, more important things as children and so on. It makes a realization for different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but what happened then? Your sporting career ended, but what's next? What was next, or what did you do?
Well, I lived 8 years in Italy when I was a pro. But then in the last few years of my career, I moved to Switzerland, and I lived there. And then when this career suddenly stopped, I was not anymore in the records of Finland. So I stayed in Switzerland as a employed. And of course, you need to look for jobs. And I did a university degree, bachelor degree in informatics. In 2008, I finished that thesis, and I thought, okay, I'll try to find a job in the computer industry. But I realized that without any experience and anything, it's super hard. So yeah, it was difficult. And then I thought, okay, maybe I can combine the business of and my experience in cycling and training, and create something together with somebody else. So we started up a couple of companies. One is still active. It's called Resistentia. It's a coaching business, but we haven't invested in programming. So it's a little bit similar, like Training Peaks in cycling, and it is coaching business online. And it was anyway a small business. I couldn't really maintain myself on that. So I think it was actually a coincidence that I stayed in cycling, because I had already made up my mind that I will do something else. But then a few months into my unemployment, a person from Italy, a journalist, called me up and asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I'm unemployed, not really anything, a little bit of everything." And he said, "Well, yeah, why don't you come and drive a VIP car in the Giro d'Italia in May?" And I said, "Yo, why not?" And it was only when I went to Italy to drive a car and speak about cycling and be close to the riders again that I realized that I don't want to stop. I like it, and I have a lot of experience. So then I started to reach out to teams, and I also talked with my former team Sky. And Dave Brailsford, he offered me to come to the tour and do the same thing for Sky at the tour, driving the VIP car. And of course that I went there. But then at the same time, I had also applied for different jobs, and one of my friends in Finland, he suggested that I would come as a substitute teacher for a small school, actually my own school where I went as a kid. And my mom, she was a teacher, so it fit in. I knew a little bit what it was, and I said, yeah, why not? I could try that, and they were in need of having somebody, so it was a perfect mix. So I had already gotten a place from 1st of August to end of the year. But at the same time, I wanted to stay in cycling. So then the day after the Tour de France, I went with Sky. I flew to Geneva because I had a new team called YAM Cycling, or I Am Cycling, and I went for a job interview with them. And because of the fact that I had been in Sky and I had quite a lot of experience from that perspective, I think they were happy to have me, and there's where I started a different career, sort of not as a professional anymore in terms of a cyclist, but more as a director sportif, which is the guy that is sitting in the car. And also doing a lot of other stuff, and and deciding about the tactics of the team. And for me, that was actually, ironically, when I was a rider, I usually said, no, I'm never going to be a DS. Because I thought it was more like he's sitting in the car and it's boring. But it proved me wrong. It wasn't boring.
There we see like how we need to test things. We need to go and do the thing to find out. There was a gap of 2 years before, or 3 years before you became the director.
1 year.
One year.
Yeah.
During that year, we know about runner's high. I'm sure, like in cycling, there's kind of high as well. Like, did you feel emotional of losing something, or how was that period?
Yeah, it was. I think in a way it was difficult, but at the same time, the complication was maybe to understand what I wanted to do. And for me, it was only a transition period of maybe 4 or 5 months. Because once I went back to, or maybe 6 months, but once I went back to cycling again, even if it was just driving the VIP car and not actually riding or anything, I realized that this is what I want to do. And before that, I had been looking at different options, but I wasn't passionate about it. It felt okay, but I wasn't really passionate. And I did have like a few months that I thought, okay, now I'm gonna try all the different training methods that I didn't have the courage to actually do when I was a professional, because risking of not being in a good shape at the right time. But yeah, without a goal, I didn't do it. Yeah. I wasn't able to do any training like a professional. So yeah,
I know how that feels like.
yeah, no, it was an interesting period where yeah, it was a little bit difficult to define what am I, because that's actually when you're a professional rider, you can identify yourself. Even if you're not the top level pro or the winner or whatever, people recognize you. They, at least when you go to the bike races, maybe not in the street, but when you go to the bike races, people recognize you, and of course that's a good feeling. Because you belong somewhere. Yeah. But now, then when you stop, then it's completely, you're a regular person, sort of, and you have to start from zero because you don't have anything else.
And that's really interesting. I think we could go from this to the last part. This is partly about the identity and who we are as a person. Like, as an athlete, it's so clear. Like, we have those goals. We know exactly what we want as an individual, as a team. But then when it's over, we're not so sure anymore. There so many things happen, like the transition inside of us that starts to form without us ever like thinking about it before. It's a new life. So if we put all those right now, like the director, a writer, and athlete, if we put those aside, like, who is left? Who is Kjell Carlström? Who are you? Who am I? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, no, it's actually a tricky one, because there's of course a lot of different things that, I mean, I'm still ambitious. There's no question about that. I'm still competitive. I like playing ice hockey. I play rink bandy, but I also like to go out on the bike, and sometimes I have to calm myself down not to be too competitive. But at the same time, I think I'm a person that wants to do 100%, or 110 if it's possible, and it doesn't matter what it is. I think for me, living up to the expectations of all the people that are around me, and striving towards new goals still now. It's something that yeah, it's part of me. And I guess that this has also been a very good part that has helped me focus pretty quickly after my career. That it didn't leave a big gap. Maybe also because I was lucky enough to have the right people at the right time offering a hand, and some a job also, because in the end life is also about getting the normal things going, and the money needs to come in so that you get food on the table and everything else. So yeah,
I think that's that's really important to understand, or to know our archetype, our identity as be it a warrior, a helper, or whatever it is. It helps us to become what we want to be in many ways. When we lose that, we are in a kind of a no man's land, and without aim or direction which way to go. But when we get that sense, it really helps us to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, from my point of view, I think I never answered exactly what I was as a rider, but in the end I was a rider that could perform better as a helper than when I was doing the same thing for myself. And I think this is something that probably also defines me as a person now. I like to be there for other people if it's needed, or somebody needs it. And I think it's also part of the reason why I'm now in a team in Israel that is a team that comes from a different background than my past team or teams, and a team with a lot of different people from different places. And not, for example, in Italy, in Liquigas, we had a lot of guys that were from Italy, of course, because in the end, that's where you get the pros from. But now in this position, we are a very multinational team, and that's part of, I think, what I like also as a person.
As a last question, I want to know, having this chance and opportunity to ask, you've been close to Chris Froome, to my understanding. So you've seen a person who's gone and won the Tour de France. What does it take? Well, I think the human abilities with the cycling are I don't know even what to say. I would die. What does it take to go all the way?
Yeah. First of all, you have to have the physical capacities. That's clear. But in order to improve your physical capacities to the level above everybody else, you also need your mind. And you, of course, your body needs to be able to support the level of training that your mind can do. But if those two connect and you're able to sustain that both mentally and physically, then you become a superstar. That's how I see it. So of course you have to have the DNA and everything for it, but you need to also have the mindset. And that's Chris. He's a very down-to-earth person, but he has the mindset and the strive to actually become even better. And now he stayed for a long time in Sky, and then Ineos crashed really badly in Dauphiné, and most of us would have stopped there. Most of the guys would never have come back on the bike, but he came back on the bike, and he's convinced that he can become a good rider again. And even if this year he has struggled a lot, but partly also because of other medical issues, which might or might not be related to the actual crash, but his mindset is still there, and I think that's the most important thing in the end. If you don't have the head with the body, you will never succeed in whatever you would like to do. But you have to be convinced about it and put your mind into it.
I think that's a good way to finish, and everything you said, I can agree 100%. The mindset is something we need as an athlete, but also like when our athletic career is over.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you, Kellu. Thank you, Kjell.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Kellu.
you.
I've learned more about cycling than during my whole life this far. So, so it was really interesting. It was really interesting, honestly.
Yeah,
thanks.
Great. I love to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao.